only one more Minnesota State Park left to go before I make it to all 69 of them. Eee! All right, we're gonna start driving to Big Stone Lake and finish up our last hiking club trail hike also. In the beginning of June 2024, I only had 16 Minnesota State Parks and Recreation areas left before I had completed the Minnesota State Parks Passport Club. My annual state park pass expired at the end of June, and I knew that I was going to be moving from the area shortly, so I really wanted to get all of these done. Unfortunately, June of 2024 was a pretty rainy month in Minnesota. On my first trip to start finishing up these parks, I went to Glendalough, Maplewood, Itasca, LaSalle State Recreation Area, and Koyana Country State Recreation Area, and I packed for that trip in the rain. Then, a week later, I did McCarthy Beach State Park, Scenic State Park, Franz Jevny State Park, Zippel Bay State Park, Big Bog State Recreation Area, and Schoolcroft State Park and Savannah Portage State Park. Packing in the rain once again, this time as we packed the travel trailer. So by the time I got to the end of June, I only had 4 Minnesota state parks left. And guess what? It was raining again. But I didn't let the rain stop me as I made the drive from Rochester to Lake Shetek State Park. It was only raining lightly when Glia and I arrived at Lake Shetek, but the bigger problem that we had was that with all the recent rain, the causeway to the hiking club trail was flooded. I had just driven 3 hours to get here, so I wasn't about to turn back now. Instead, Glia and I decided to hike the trail even with a little bit of flooding. There were no markers that indicated that the trail was closed, and the area that was flooded had firm footing underneath, so I wasn't going to tear up the mud of the trail. It was a nice loop hike around Loon Island, and there were several pelicans hanging out on the lake. Glia and I were both pretty wet after this hike, but nonetheless, we enjoyed it. And I think if you visited on a day that was a little less rainy and a little less flooded, this would be a lovely hiking club trail. It is only a mile in length and is surrounded by water, even when it's not flooded. From Lake Shetek, we drove north to Camden State Park. Still wet from Lake Shetek, neither Glia or I minded the intermittent light rain that continued at Camden. The trailhead was a little bit hard to find here. We ended up parking near the swimming area, and there were signs that dogs weren't allowed in the swimming area, but it turns out we had to walk just a little bit past that to get to the hiking club trail, and dogs are allowed on that trail. So be aware that if you park by the swimming area, there's a little trail from there around the swimming area that you can take with your dog. The trail itself was lovely with some streams, forests, and prairie sections. Parts of the trail were a little muddy, but nothing too bad here. The Camden State Park Hiking Club Trail is 2.4 miles in length. After hiking at Camden State Park, our next stop was Parle State Park. Not sure if I'm pronouncing that one right. But this was another smaller state park. It did have a few spread out sections, so just be aware as you come into that there are a few different areas. I drove to the park office first so that I could get my passport stamp, but it turns out that the passport stamp is actually at the trailhead near the hiking club trail. So just go to that section where the hiking club trail is. You'll be able to get your passport stamp there as well. The trail was a nice loop. It was a little buggy and a little muddy, but it did have some nice, again, river, forest, and prairie views. The trail at this state park is 2 miles in length. The hiking trail starts at the Works Progress Administration picnic shelter, and then you get to hike through wooded areas with trees and flowers, following the trail as it circles around the backwaters and returns to the canoe landing. With Parle State Park completed, I only had one more Minnesota State Park before I had finished the Passport Club. The Passport Club includes 69 Minnesota State Parks and Recreation areas. It originally had 71, but 2 of the parks have since closed. So, as I headed to Big Stone Lake State Park, I was heading to my 69th Minnesota State Park, and I was super excited to finish the journey that I had started at the end of 2019. As we drove up to Big Stone Lake State Park, I was debating on whether or not to hike the hiking club trail that same day and do all 4 in one day. It was going to be a little bit stormy overnight, and I wasn't sure if I wanted to camp. but ultimately it was a pretty campground. So Glee and I set up the truck camper. It's such an easy thing to do and a nice, comfortable spot to sleep. The storms weren't too bad overnight, and Glee and I were able to enjoy a nice, relaxing morning the next day. After we had eaten breakfast and got the truck camper folded back down, we drove to the other part of the state park area where the hiking club trail was.
Time for the last hiking club trail. Here we go.
The hiking club trail at Big Stone Lake State Park is 2.2 miles in length and begins just north of the boat landing parking lot at the Bonanza area. It follows the shore of Big Stone Lake through a glen of oak, aspen, and chokecherries. You get to hike over a little hillside which once formed the bed of glacial River Warren, cross some spring-fed creeks and past a little waterfall, and then the trail will loop around on itself and you'll head back towards the parking lot. This was a nice little trail to wrap up my hiking club trail adventures, and it was a fun experience to find the hiking club password and have it be our last one. Although there are 69 state parks and recreation areas in the Passport Club, there are only 67 hiking club trails, so this was our 67th, if you don't include the bonus one at William O'Brien. And as we found the password at this park, it brought our journey to the end. If you're curious about the details of Minnesota's hiking and passport clubs, stay tuned in the rest of this video and I'll talk about the details of these two fun Minnesota clubs. I just finished the Minnesota hiking and passport clubs for the Minnesota State Parks. I found out about these clubs in 2019, just before New Year's. I was at William O'Brien State Park, just about 30 minutes from my home at the time, and I went into the visitor center area to their store and was looking around and saw them. I had needed to get a new parks pass. I normally get an annual parks pass so I can go in and out of the state parks as I desire, and I saw these hanging on the wall. And now I have the older versions. They have been updated since, but they were about $15 each, and if you complete them, you're going to end up with 2 free nights of camping each. And so really it pays off, and it was a no-brainer, and I was looking for a fun goal. Little did I know that a couple short months later, the pandemic would hit and I would really be spending a lot of time out and hiking. But even without knowing what was coming up in the next few years, I was really excited to take the opportunity to have another goal and to explore all over my home state of Minnesota. Minnesota state parks are scattered throughout the state, and I mostly, at that point, had only explored around the Twin Cities area, around Rochester, and then a couple spots on the North Shore. So I was very excited to slowly check all of these off the list. So a little bit about the clubs. The hiking club trail has a trail at just about every Minnesota state park that is labeled as the hiking club trail. And they can range anything from 1 mile in length to 6.5 miles in length. So there is a wide variety of lengths of trails, and the difficulty varies too. Some of them are wheelchair accessible on boardwalks, and some of them are going to involve a lot of up and down and watching your footing. At the time that I purchased these, there were 71 state parks and recreation areas in the Passport Club with 4 additional bonus spots. And there were 68 hiking club trails with 1 bonus trail. Now, since I purchased these in 2019, 2 state parks have closed. So Upper Sioux Agency and Hill Annex Mine are no longer accessible. They were both on my list to finish up this last month, but they closed before that, so I did not get to either of those 2. I started my hiking club journey with the bonus trail at William O'Brien. So I did all the hiking club trails between January of 2020 and June of 2024. Some people do these a lot faster, but I enjoyed that pace. It allowed me to spend more time in different places. It spread out the adventure a little bit. The hiking club has descriptions of all of the trails inside of it. And with the hiking club, you're going to be walking those trails of varying length and looking for a password. So they're pretty well labeled. There were a couple that were a little overgrown and hard to find, and some that had faded signs, but most of them are going to be pretty easy to find. Once you find the sign with the hiking club password on it, you record it, write it down, and then you can check that hiking club trail off your list, add up the miles, and for every kind of marker in the mileage, you get a little patch. The rewards are here in this book. You can see that you get one at 25, 50, 75, 100 miles. So every 25 miles that you hike, you get a fun patch. And here you can see some of my early patches. You get the free night of camping once you've done 100 miles and then once you've completed all the miles. The total mileage for all of the hiking club trails before Upper Sioux Agency closed was 197. But Upper Sioux Agency did have a 4.3 mile hiking club trail, so now it's a little less than 193 miles. But still, a kind of fun accomplishment. The updated Passport Club now has these two kind of combined together. But for the Passport Club, all you have to do is go to the entrance area of the park and find a stamp. And then you record the stamp and the date that you arrived in your passport. And it has spots for all the state parks and recreation areas, including the bonus ones. The bonus ones are bonuses because they're hard to get to. Like Garden Island, you can only get to in the winter when the lake is frozen or by using a boat. So there are some harder to get to ones in there. And then you also get the chance to make a little diary, record what happened when you visited. What did you do? Did you hike? Did you camp? What was your experience? So if you don't like hiking as much, the Passport Club is the way to go. I think the two of them pair up really well together because you can go get your passport stamp and then go find the hiking club trail. Once I've completed the hiking club trail, if I have more time, I'll explore the rest of the park and see what else they have to offer. Some of the hiking club trails are fantastic, and some of them are definitely not the best trails in the park. So leave a little bit of time to explore more and enjoy the sights. You know, you can't go to Itasca without going to the headwaters in the Mississippi. When you're up on the North Shore parks, there are so many amazing trails. So make sure you leave time to enjoy them. So that's my overview of the Hiking Club and Passport Club. Thanks for watching. And let me know in the comment section below, what's your favorite Minnesota State Park? And if you don't have a favorite Minnesota State Park, just let me know where your favorite spot to hike in Minnesota is. There's so many good options. Have a great week, everyone.